Hi there, and thank you for tuning in to another Finite Podcast episode. Over the Christmas break, I had so many thoughts whirling around about B2B marketing this year, as I synthesized all of the incredible advice we heard on the podcast in 2024. That's why I've decided to do another quick solo episode. I received such kind feedback on my last one, so I do hope you enjoy. Part of my Christmas reflection was a bit of a meta-analysis. In thinking about all the great advice we'd heard on the show, I wondered how relevant it would be for listeners. Whether there is really any true universal marketing advice, and the extent to which marketing needs to be done on a case-by-case basis. I started questioning whether there is ever one true marketing formula. Will the strategy that works for one company really work for another? They might be in the same market, but do they have the same company culture? They might have the same audience, but do they have similar brands? There are endless variables in marketing, so how many of these matter when thinking about strategy? There are MBAs dedicated to understanding marketing fundamentals. We have so many guidebooks, playbooks, and podcasts. How much of this advice should be taken with a pinch of salt? There's marketing psychology that seeks to understand what makes buyers buy. But is human behavior really that predictable across the board? Today, I'm going to investigate some of these questions and find out how much you can really extrapolate the tactics and strategy of other brands onto your own. So let's start by looking at a theory of extrapolation. Results can be applied to other populations if they have enough of the right shared variables. In other words, what works for brand A might not work for brand B if the results depend on something that brand A has and brand B doesn't. For example, MailChimp has ads in the London Underground. I would assume that drives a lot of revenue for them, otherwise they wouldn't have been doing it for years. This is quite a surprising tactic for a B2B business. But how many B2B companies would it actually work for? Current advice suggests it would work for many. The more brand awareness, the better. And tube ads are very sticky, with people boxed in, avoiding eye contact, staring at the walls full of ads. But I think MailChimp's success is dependent on the fact that, 1, their audience pool size is very large. Think about all the people starting email newsletters for their small businesses and side hustles. 2, their brand is consumer appropriate and would probably not deter people in a B2C environment. Their name and logo are literally a chimp. So I think tube ads won't be the given advice for most B2B brands, even if they have a huge budget. I think I've used quite an obvious example here, but the issue becomes more complex and harder to spot when we look a bit deeper. There are likely so many more unknown factors of MailChimp's brand, team, and marketing strategy that influence the impact of these ads. And those are practically impossible to identify because you don't know what you don't know. Let's take a look at another example that seemingly draws on psychology. It's also increasingly relevant as we head into 2025. I predict it will be a big trend this year. And that is emotional advertising. Emotional ads claim to be effective due to fundamental truths of the human mind and subsequent behavior. Emotional triggers are said to leave resonance, so your brand will be more memorable if your ads trigger an emotion in your audience. And this is quite a new and radical thing if you've been in the B2B industry for over 5 years. B2B used to be very resistant to emotions, remaining professional with a business-like tone of voice and branding. So I get it. I get why this is a cool thing to do, and I understand why B2B brands are all jumping on the bandwagon. In fact, in the latest Finite Times newsletter, I shared a link to an article that outlined the common elements of last year's B2B campaign award entries, and emotion was prevalent in all of them. However, we need to consider the underlying unknown factors that might make this tactic work for one company and not for another. Perhaps it's to do with the sector. Lawyers, who stereotypically value precision, professionalism, and straightforwardness, might believe that emotional ads and copy are superfluous for the business environment. That means that the statement, triggering emotions leaves resonance, isn't applicable if that emotion is disgust or disappointment. I want to introduce here an idea about cause and effect. Just because A is an effect of B does not mean B caused E. Perhaps the reason that brands find emotional ads work is 1, something we've already discussed, their unique context and variables, and 2, because at the beginning of 2024, not many brands were doing it. Perhaps the reason why emotional ads worked for these brands is not because emotion is memorable, but uniqueness is memorable. Perhaps emotion is memorable, but not as memorable as uniqueness. If everyone starts making emotional ads, audiences might get desensitized, and those brands, in turn, will become less memorable. This argument again supports the idea that formulaic marketing, or hopping on marketing trends, does not work in your favor. This is why people employ creative agencies, because they offer unique perspectives and ideas that are tailored to your brand's needs. Now, all this isn't to say that marketing guides and fundamentals aren't important. Some things addressed in these are obvious and logical. One good example of this is the work from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. They use empirical research to discover overarching truths about marketing and B2B. So they have rules like the 95-5 rule, which states that in B2B generally, only 5% of your potential customers are likely to be in market for your product at any given time. So with this knowledge, you can adapt your marketing to focus on brand resonance, so that when they are in market to buy, they're familiar with you. This is a highly strategic level of thinking, and the tactics with which you achieve brand resonance, I think, will always differ from company to company, no matter the sector, audience size, or branding. The lesson is perhaps to take inspiration from others to help them spark your own ideas, but I don't think you can really take tactics from other brands. You, as a B2B marketer, need to understand your audience and brand first and foremost. You need to get to grips with all of the variables that will impact your strategy, channels, and tactics. To do this, you need to talk to your customers, understand their personas, and look at data to experiment with new ideas and measure results precisely. You could look at each brand as its own unique scientific discipline. You can rely on known experimental methods and existing laws, but each experiment is its own, with its own variables and results. Ultimately, it's difficult to distinguish between fundamentals and fluff. On the Finite podcast, we like to talk about marketing at quite a high level, where anyone listening can learn how to impact their strategies. Anything more tactical is seen as inspiration, not something to rinse and repeat. Again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Finite podcast. I hope you enjoyed my second solo episode. Please connect with me on LinkedIn to share any feedback or thoughts. I think it is a bit unfair that I get to ramble on to no objections. So let me know if you think I'm right or wrong.